Okay, great. Thank you everyone for coming today. Hopefully you can all see my screen, but please let me know if not. And welcome to today's webinar on Altmetric Explorer for Institutions, Introducing New Features. My name is Kat. I run the marketing here at Altmetric. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get into the main presentation. The webinar is being recorded and we'll share the recording afterwards. So if you need to review it or want to share it with anyone, you'll be able to. Please enter any questions into actually the Q&A box, sorry, not the chat box. You should just see a little Q&A sign where you can type any questions that you have. And please let me know if you can't hear or see. I'll do what I can to help, but hopefully we shouldn't have any issues. So today's agenda, I'm going to be walking you through an introduction to some really exciting new Altmetric Explorer features that we've recently released. This includes some enhancements in our results analysis tabs, some new shareable public reports that you can share with people who don't have Explorer access. I'll do a quick live demo of these new features and then move on to talking briefly about our new Amazon book tracking before we have the Q&A session at the end. So to begin, what is the Explorer for Institutions? Really, it's an easy to use web platform that lets users across your organization browse and report on the attention data for scholarly content. It can help you with lots of things, not least with finding the attention for articles, books, and over 13 million research outputs in total. And those are research outputs from your institution as well as those of peer institutions. For all of those items, you have the opportunity to see whether we've picked up any engagement for them online. And you can dig into the data to really track the attention and the engagement that is happening around those individual items. So you can see who's talking about them, what they're saying, what kind of influence they're having, what kind of reach they're achieving. And you can use all of these insights to really pull out and report on those key achievements. So if you're looking to demonstrate to funders or to alumni the value in the work that you're producing, our data can really help you do that in a really easy and accessible way. So this is the Explorer for Institutions. This is the main page that you see when you go in. Up the top here, we have a search bar where you can find research outputs. You can search for authors from your institution. You can search from departments. You can put in identifiers for outputs. You can search by journal. It gives you a lot of kind of quite comprehensive options for how you can filter and browse through our data. And then based on what you've searched for, you'll see your search results displayed below. For each item, you'll see our donut and attention score, which is the indicator of the type and volume of attention the item has received. If you see a little blue tick, that means it belongs to your institution. And that can be done after a short implementation process where you just need to tell us which of the items already in our database or in a file that you can give to us or we can pull from your CRIS system belong to you. So you can see, okay, if you were searching the full Altmetric database, these are the most popular papers based on your search results, and you can easily pick out which ones are from your institution. And then over on the right-hand side here, we have the results analysis. And this is where you can get more in depth into the mentions at an aggregate level, see some nice graphs, and export the mentions data, which I'll talk a little bit about in a minute. Within the institutional edition of the Explorer, because we also offer a publisher version, you have the option for the My Institution view. And this is where, as a result of the implementation process, you can browse by department or by author. So you can see here, you can click through and we'll mirror the setup of your institutional hierarchy to make it easy to find the departments or the groups or the people that you're looking for. And then you can click through to see the outputs from those people or those groups that have attention in the Explorer. And of course, for every item, we give you access to a details page. This is our collated record of attention for an item. And you can click through all of the tabs along the top to see the original mentions. So you can get an understanding of, okay, not just this book or this article, for example, has had a lot of mentions, but actually see what people are saying and who is saying it. So you get a much better understanding of why that engagement is occurring. On the left-hand side here, you just get a quick summary of all of the attention. And then there are links to sign up to receive new mentions whenever it gets some more attention online, or to click through to see the original item on the publisher's site. So what's new? We've added some really exciting enhancements to our results analysis tabs that make it easier to identify your global reach in Twitter, Facebook, news, and policy. And we've also added the ability to search for specific mentions from media outlets and people. So you can no longer just see all the news attention, you can see the news attention from just the outlets that you really care about or particularly want to track interest from, if that's what is key for you. I'll be also walking you through some shareable reports that we've added. So you can now pull in some of our really nice visualizations and make a nice PDF or a printable report that you can share with others internally or even externally if you wanted to share it online via your Twitter, for example, or something like that. And then lastly, the Amazon book tracking, which we've recently added. We've been tracking books for a while, but we've now expanded that with our new Amazon coverage. So what's new? The new maps. You can see here in this image what it actually looks like in the platform, but they basically show the distribution of attention for Twitter, Facebook, news, and policy. They identify the total number of posts as well as the number of unique authors. So you can see, okay, in Facebook in the UK, for example, I've had 10 posts, but they came from 2 people, me and my mum, which is perfectly fine. But this is really interesting for helping you understand where in the world your research is getting engagement. And that's exactly what we propose you do with it. So, for example, here, departments might like to use the maps to understand where their audiences are, so they can see where there's an awareness of their work and how that changes over time. This can be really useful if you're trying to raise, of course, the awareness of your work in a specific region, or if your studies perhaps focus on a specific part of the world, if you want to see if you're actually reaching people there, and whether they are kind of growing in their awareness of your work. So in the images on the right here, we've looked at Carnegie Mellon's School of Biological Sciences. So the most attention on Twitter, Facebook, news, and policy all comes from the US. But there's also a lot of other interesting engagement. So on Twitter, for example, there's also a lot of engagement from the UK, Canada, and France. In Facebook, it's coming from Brazil, which is really interesting. Perhaps they're doing some research that specifically focuses on that area. In news, there's coverage from the UK, Germany, and Australia. And then policy, they're having a big impact in Switzerland, where perhaps a lot of policymakers are based, but it's still interesting to see that they are picking up Carnegie Mellon's work, and the UK. So their work is having an influence not just on policy in the US, but much more internationally as well. Searching by mention, source, outlet, or author is a really powerful bit of functionality that we've just added. So you'll hopefully be aware that Altmetric tracks thousands of sources, certainly thousands of news and blog sites, a lot of social media, so Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, as well as other channels like Wikipedia, YouTube, Stack Exchange, some more academic forums like post-publication peer review sites, F1000 Prime, Mendeley, as well as policy sources. So we have a huge list of global policy sources where we pick up when they reference research. And now what this new searching functionality enables you to do is to search for really specific things within those sources. So like I said, if you want to see if the BBC News is picking up on your research and talking about it or featuring it in their stories, that's now easy to find. The search results that you get when you do this search, this is what they look like. So you just put you can just type in the name of who you want to search for there, run your search, and then you scroll down and you can click through to the mentions and the details pages for the item. So you can easily kind of surface those nice mentions. And then once you've filtered to the mentions that you really care about, a really exciting new thing that we've added is the ability to export them. So for example, what you could do is just search for all of the policy mentions from your institution. Then you could export all of that data, do some CSV kind of pivot table work, and easily see, okay, which policy sources are talking about our research the most, which ones aren't really so aware of it, And you can do that not just for your own publications, of course, but for everything in the Altmetric database. So if you want to see, okay, our chemistry department is being picked up most in these news sources, but our peer institution's chemistry department is getting a lot of coverage from these places where we don't have much traction, maybe we should look to do something there. That's the kind of thing and the kind of analysis that you can now run with this functionality. Another benefit is that it can really help you identify who the key opinion leaders engaging with your research are. This might be particularly useful for research communications and marketing teams because they can now search for specific media coverage and identify those key outlets or groups to build relationships with. So if you're looking to raise the profile of your institution or to become better known in certain disciplines or in certain areas of expertise, this is a really good way to start thinking about not just which news outlets perhaps, but also maybe which bloggers do we need to engage with, or are we not quite targeting the right people? Or are there communities out there talking about other institutions' research that we really should be engaging with as well? At the same time, the Alumni Office can use this functionality to demonstrate some of the nicer high-profile engagement to encourage future donations perhaps, or even just to find nice stories to put into newsletters or other communications that go out to alumni lists. So I think on my next slide here, for example, the researcher example at the bottom here, this is Stephen Hawking tweeting about someone's work. So nice not just for alumni offices, of course, but for the researchers themselves. So they can now easily find those really notable mentions, the ones that they really care about and that their funders or their management will most care about, and include them in their CV, for example, or in funding applications, or perhaps their annual report. If your department perhaps does an annual blog post or some other kind of review of the year, these are the kinds of insights that it's really nice to pull out and include. And then perhaps if you're in the research office or a department head, you can really get a quick and easy understanding of which policy bodies are referencing work from your institution, what they're saying about it, in what context it is being included, what other research is also referenced in the same policy document. So it can help you see, again, where you're having an influence and a reach. And although, of course, this is an impact in itself, it is perhaps an indicator of the early stages of something that might lead to a real tangible impact, a real world impact. So onto the shareable reports. So previously in the Explorer, we've had some really nice visualizations and we had lots and lots of requests for, please can we export them? Can we make a nice PDF out of them? So we've delivered exactly that, and we really hope you enjoy using them and find them useful. So they can be generated from any saved search. And of course, as I've mentioned, there is the option to share them with users who don't have access to the Explorer, which is really great because it means you can share them with colleagues, with funders, especially, for example, or even with management who haven't perhaps been in the platform and don't quite know what they're looking for. They can be customized with a selection of reporting blocks, and they can be printed, saved, or shared publicly as a web page. So you could even perhaps include a link to one in an online application that you might be doing, or in your social profile, or even in your email signature to really help kind of showcase that engagement that your work is receiving. Within the actual functionality of the report, you can use the auto-generated title or create your own, which we recommend. It obviously makes it easier for you to recognize and to help explain to people what it is. The initial section, you can rearrange all of the sections, but the one that will pop up first is the report overview, and it provides an all-time overview of the stats for your search query. And it really just helps set the context. So it helps tell the people who are reading your report, in this report, there are mentions for X number of articles. We found engagement from this many sources, and this many of the outputs actually have attention. Next, you'll find the attention source breakdown. So this is where you show a summary of all of the attention sources that have mentioned outputs in your search query. So you can see here, for example, the items in this search query have been featured in almost 2,000 news stories, almost 500 policy references, which is a huge amount. They've also received almost 200 F1000 posts, nearly 1,000 Reddit posts, and have also been included in the comments of 140 YouTube videos. So there might be some really interesting videos in there to watch about, people telling the stories of their research or other ways of visualizing the academic work that is going on. The attention chart shows a display of mentions over time. It's configurable to show total mentions or mentions from a specific attention source. So if you really want to focus just on, perhaps you work in the research communications office in your institution, and you want to show how your efforts to build relationships with news media have resulted in more attention over the last 6 months or a year or a few years for your research from a specific discipline in your organization, that's the kind of thing you can do with this graph. The time frame, as I mentioned, was configurable. So here it goes way back to 1970, but if you wanted to make it much shorter to just show, for example, the most recent data, then there is the option to do that. And a top outputs list. So every year at Altmetric, we produce a top 100 list. Everyone seems to quite like it. And we find that these top lists, although of course we're by no way saying this is the best research, this is the research that we have found the most attention for. They're a really nice way of driving engagement with the people who are looking at the data and helping them see how different research outputs compare to one another. So as I mentioned, the donut will change color depending on the sources of attention, and the score, the attention score in the middle, is higher if there has been more attention. The list is configurable to show the top 5, 10 or 20 outputs. So perhaps you could make one for yourself or your department or even a specific project that you've worked on. And each output has a link to the public Altmetrics details page. So that record that I showed where you could click through all of the tabs to see the original mentions, you can access that, the public version of that, from these reports as well. And then really crucially, you can share these reports with others. So users of Explorer for institutions might like to share them. If you're a librarian, for example, it might be nice to create something like this for a faculty head or even just for a researcher who wants to understand more about their engagement that their work has received. For researchers to share with funders to demonstrate kind of the broader attention and the influence that their work is having, or for management to help them review at a kind of high level in these reports at the moment, the overall attention that research from an institution or a department or even a researcher is getting. This is now a really nice way of presenting that data. So as I mentioned, you can email a shareable link. You can, of course, download a PDF and email that, or you can print a copy and hand it over to someone. And although at the moment, as I mentioned, this gives a fairly high-level view, we are looking to add additional reporting blocks really soon and hope to make it really interactive so that you can really get some interesting insights into those reports. So now I'm going to pause the presentation and give you a live demo of some of this latest functionality. Okay. Just see. Okay, so here you should be able to see the main Explorer database. I think, let me just share my screen again. It should be working now. So this is what you see when you first log in to Explorer for Institutions. This gives you access, you can see here, to our full database if I click on this button. So we have attention for over 13 million research outputs in the database, and over 8 million of them actually have attention. So there's an awful lot of data in here, so being able to easily search and filter it is really important. When you're in the institutional edition, you have the option to look at the entire database or just to see research from your institution, which you can do over here. As I mentioned, you can use this search bar to search for specific research outputs, for example, and it will come up with some suggestions either of journals or authors or departments if that fits with what you search for. If I search for an author, it will bring up the specific author from my institution. You can sort the results by different things. So the source of the attention, if you're specifically interested in that, the number of mentions, Or if you want to do something a little bit more detailed in the advanced search, you have lots of options for searching by publisher, by journal, based on the unique identifier of the output, based on when it was published, or even based on when it was mentioned. So there's lots of options here for narrowing down to the search that you really want. You can run a PubMed query to help you kind of define your subject areas, if that's useful, or you can just pop in someone's ORCID ID, perhaps if you want to look at a researcher who isn't already affiliated with your institution, for example. Over here, we have save searches. So this is where when you save a search from the main screen, it all appears, and I'll show you this in more detail a little bit later. And then this here is where you see your institutional view. So we have the author tab, and once your institution had been implemented, you'd see a full list of all of your authors here, and then the departments as well. So as I mentioned, we can replicate the institutional hierarchy of your organization to make it easy to find. So you can search for these authors and departments either in the main search screen, like I just showed, or via the tabs on this page, and just click through to view all of the results from there. So for now, I'm going to take a look at Benilda's research. So if I click on View Results, these are now all of Benilda's articles. They have these little blue ticks because they belong to an author at my institution. I'm going to start by going into Analyze Results. So this is the section where I was showing the new mentions functionality that we've just built. When you first go in, you get this summary graph that shows all of the attention for Benilda's research outputs. You can change the graph to show just mentions from specific sources. The Highlights tab at the moment will show just the news mentions. We're looking to expand this tab in future, but for now, if you wanted to see just the latest mentions of Benilda's work in the news, this is where you would go, and you can see underneath which article is mentioned in the news story and who the author and the department from your university was that is affiliated with that article. The demographics is where the first bit of our new functionality comes in, so this is where the maps live. So you can see here on the Twitter map that the majority of tweets about Benilda's work come from the US. She's had 206 total tweets from 154 total tweeters. Interestingly, not too far down the list are a lot of tweets from Spain and the Netherlands, so it's quite a wide kind of international mix there. If we look at Facebook, the story is partly similar but partly different. So the US remains fairly high, but other countries come into it as well, although in fairly low numbers. In terms of news outlets, you can see she's received quite a lot of attention in the US, but also some coverage from India, Australia, and Japan, which is really interesting. You know, it would be interesting to dig down to see what outlets from those countries were featuring her work and why they were talking about it. And then the policy sources. So 9 policy documents, from 5 unique policy sources. So for example, the World Health Organization have referenced Benilda's work, and those span 3 countries, so the US, Netherlands, and Switzerland. If I skip to the Mentions tab now, so you might be interested, for example, in seeing whether a specific news outlet has mentioned Benilda's work. I looked for the BBC News earlier and there wasn't anything, and then I searched for the Daily Mail, and lo and behold, there was a mention. It's kind of interesting to see which sources have engaged with your work and which haven't. And then, of course, you can click through here to see the details of the article, or through here to read that news story. If you just wanted to, for example, search for mentions from a specific source, you can either type it in the box or you can select them from here. So if I select tweets, this should now show me all of the tweets about Benilda's work. So it shows me who made the tweet, what they wrote, and which article it was about, as well as when it was. And then you can click to export these mentions as a CSV, where you can do that further analysis that I talked about to help identify who is tweeting about your work the most, what are they saying positive things, and should you be reaching out to them to try and build a relationship perhaps, or maybe just kind of even thinking about following them on Twitter, for example, to kind of start building those networks. Lastly, on the results analysis tab, you get this journals and collections tab. So this is useful for things like collection development, perhaps, if you want to see where research from your institution is published in journals, but then also what attention that research has received. That can be helpful for things like that. You can sort this, so if you want to see which journal has content with the most blog post mentions, for example, you can do that. And you can save all of these searches. So not only can you export this data here and on most of the other tabs, you can also save them and access them via your saved searches. So I'm back now to the main screen that just shows all of the attention for Benilde's research outputs. I'm going to save this search and then head over to my saved searches, where it now appears in my saved search list. So you have the option here to subscribe to a daily email, a weekly email, or a monthly email that will send you a report straight to your inbox of the latest attention, or a report actually of all time attention, including the latest happenings of Benilde's work. Or you can opt for our new shareable report. You just click this little bit of paper. If you want to change the layout of the report, you just click Edit Report here. So if you want to edit the title, for example, you can just click here. So you might say Benilde Anderson's research outputs sorted by Altmetric attention score. You can delete and re-add the different sections of the report from over here. So if you wanted to start with attention over time, you could do, and then you could add the attention breakdown in. And it will always add things to the bottom. So if you wanted that to appear under there, you would need to kind of shift things around a little bit. So here you can see we have the graph of attention. We've got the top 5 research outputs. But again, if you want to change that, you can do. You can make it show the top 10 or the top 20 instead. And then we have the attention source breakdown over here. I think there's one thing, the overview, of course, is still missing from here. So this is what gives us the summary of all of the attention. Okay. Sorry, you can't see how I'm editing the report. Sorry about that. Hopefully this is better now. Sorry about that. So just to run through quickly again, I edited the title here and just clicked done. I clicked the cross here to remove sections. You can edit them here to show the top 5 or the top 20, for example. And you can switch out and rearrange them as you like. So here you see the attention source breakdown that we talked about and the report overview, which gives you a bit of a summary of all of the attention. So if I wanted to start building from scratch again, you can just pick in what order you want to add things. And then adjust them as you wish. So you can change the chart, for example, to show just mentions from news stories and show mentions from, let's go, just the past year. And then it will show you that. And then when you're done, you just click Save Changes. And you have the option to either download the PDF. You need to tick here to make it public if you want a publicly shareable link. And then you're free to do whatever you like with that URL. Great, I'm glad we got there in the end and that you could see it. It's a really cool feature and we've had some nice feedback and I hope you get a lot of use out of it. We're looking forward to seeing lots of them shared online and to hear how they're being used in practice. So that's the end of the demo for now. I'm just going to go back to the slides and talk through some of our new Amazon Books tracking. So what is Altmetric for books? So just like Altmetric for articles, we track, monitor, and collate the online attention surrounding books to really help authors and institutions understand the engagement for their research. This is particularly important for books, we thought, because they are so often underrepresented with traditional metrics like citations or even download counts, which still do a much better job of representing influence of journal articles. We have a lot of book attention data already. We currently have over 800,000 books in the Altmetric Book Index. We have about 50 publishers and aggregators that we currently support. So when we say support, we mean we're tracking the books that they publish. And in total, that equates to over 1.5 million mentions of books to date. So just like with journal articles, there is a lot of activity going on around books online, and digging into this data can be really helpful for understanding how your research is being used and what kind of influence it's having beyond the academy. We've got some really nice book-specific attention sources as well. Last year, we integrated data from the Open Syllabus project, which enables you to see where your book has been included in syllabi at institutions around the world. You can see this on the individual details pages for each book, and it throws up some really interesting use cases. We had an instance where one publisher, they had quite an old kind of backlist title that they thought wasn't really much referenced or much kind of used anymore. And when they looked at the Open Syllabus data, they realized that actually it was being included as kind of a core text in all of these, you know, hundreds of reading lists, and that really perhaps they should be thinking about reissuing it or providing at least an update to the older version. So there's some really interesting use cases of the Open Syllabus project data there. And it's a really nice thing, I think, for book authors or even people who are contributing chapters to be able to see that their book is actually being used in teaching of a specific subject. We also have some book reviews. These at the moment mainly come from news sources, but we are planning to add to them. So of course, if you've written a book, the first thing you probably want to know is, well, A, how many copies has it sold, but also what did people think of it? What are the kind of the headline press saying about it? So we surface that in this book reviews tab. And of course, you can click through to read the original review. And we're hoping to add many more book-specific attention sources in future, so stay tuned for that. So how are people using this data? Well, of course, to track the engagement of their books and even individual chapters, where we've been able to break it down to that level. Much like with articles, they're using these insights to demonstrate influence to funders or to management. As I mentioned, this could be particularly useful for people who don't work in disciplines or don't do research in disciplines where the article is their primary form of output. To find indicators of the outcomes of their work, so indicators, early indicators of that influence, of that reach, of where it's being picked up, and also to inform engagement activities. So again, like I mentioned, if you're an institution who are looking to grow the recognition of your expertise in certain disciplines, or in certain parts of the world, you can use the insights for these books as well as for the articles to inform those engagement activities that you're running. So why did Altmetric start tracking Amazon books? Amazon, of course, a household name these days, and we were really keen to help people understand a fuller picture of where their books were being used and talked about online. In terms of how it actually works, we really kind of start with the aggregator sites or the platform on the left. So where I mentioned we support over 50 publishers and aggregators, that is what is happening here on the left. So we're tracking individual publisher platforms, but also sites like Amazon and Google Books now. We then find the mention in a source that we track. So we're monitoring Twitter and the news outlets and the news reviews. So we're tracking those sources constantly. We look for links that go to a URL that we recognize as being the platform or an aggregator that we track. And then we follow the link to that aggregator to use the identifier that we find on that page to figure out which book it is. And then we match the mention to the book. And that identifier typically for a book would be an ISBN or even a DOI. So when we added Amazon data, we saw huge amounts of attention, as you might expect. So far, we've seen nearly 600,000 book mentions from Twitter, and this is for the Amazon hosted version of the book. 23,940 of those tweets mentioned books in our database. About 20,000 mentions from sources such as news, blogs, and policy documents have been picked up already. And this really is growing every day. You know, these numbers are after a fairly short period, so there's a huge amount of attention out there. So in the next 6 months, we are hoping to do a refresh of the open syllabus data. They're rewriting a bit of their code base, I believe, and we'll be updating our data in line with that. So it will be interesting to see how that changes over time as well. And as I mentioned, we hope to add some new book sources and continue to add actually new publishers and aggregators that we track, as well as new policy sources. So all of the time we are building new modules to track new policy outlets as well. So that was it for the presentation. I'm just going to take a look. If you do have any questions, please pop them in the Q&A box. Let us have a look. So the shareable reports. So currently you can only email the report to yourself. Are there any plans to be able to email it to others without having to print or email it to yourself and then share? That's a really interesting use case, actually, which I will definitely take back to our development team. You can't do it at the moment. As I said, I will take it back to them though. I think what you would need to do for now is copy, you could make it public, copy the URL and then email them the URL. But that's a really nice idea. Is there a chance to use Altmetric to see whether outputs from a particular disciplinary area have received mentions outside the domain? We don't actually include subject areas in the database at the moment. I think perhaps what you could do is filter, export the mentions like I showed, or search them, and then look to see, for example, you might find that there are blogs or Facebook pages, for example, where the research has been shared or mentioned that are clearly from a specific discipline. So I think that might help you start to get an idea of that. Has the policy database scope been increased? Previously, it seemed to have missed a lot of policy mentions. Yes, it has definitely increased. Certainly in the last 4 months or so, we've added, I think, over 10 new policy sources, but I would need to double check that. And as I mentioned, it is growing all the time. And we would really love to hear any recommendations or requests that anyone has for adding new policy sources. So please do send those into the email address you can see here on screen, if there are any that you would like to see. So yes, has grown and continues to grow. Okay, my institution isn't currently using Explorer for institutions, but we are embedding donuts into our institutional repository. Are the book metrics active right now? The book metrics are active, so we offer the free donuts to embed into your institutional repository. I would need to check on the technical details on adding those to books data. My understanding is that it should just work the same, but we can follow up with you on that. It may take a slightly different bit of code. Okay, I think that was it for today. Do we have what's in the chat box? Okay, perfect. So sorry about the sharing of the report in the first place. I hope it was useful when you got to see it in the end. If you do have any questions or would like a quote or to find out about implementation or access for your institution, please do get in touch via email at info@altmetric.com. We'd really love to talk with you and even to learn more about your use cases as well. You know, so the features we've released recently are a really good step towards think where we want to go, but obviously we're hoping to do many more exciting things in future, and we'd love to work with you to deliver them. Okay, thanks very much, everybody.